never fucked anybody over in my life. Didn't have it coming. You got that? All I have in this world is my balls and my word. And I don't break them for no one. You understand?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I work for Kaiser Soze.
Tu me déçois énormément.
I work for Kaiser Soze.
Je suis colère, les enfants, je suis colère.
What's up, Kongs and Lady Kongs? Welcome to Admit 1, your movie ticket. I am your host, Jim. Today, we're going to be talking about King Kong. Firstly, we're going to be talking about the original King Kong from 1933. I've seen this version twice. The second time was for this podcast. My only experience with it other than that is Mad TV did a skit of King Kong where he would climb the building and he maybe got a boner that went into the window. And the people didn't know what it was, so they're trying to push it out. And as they're trying to push it out, they're obviously rubbing it. And rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. And then it cuts to people down there, and they're like, oh, look at that monster on the side of the building. He looks guilty. Because they finished him off. And then, of course, my favorite segment of all time of the Simpsons Halloween episodes, King Homer. That is my only experience with this other than watching it the two times. We had always watched the 76 version, which is coming up next. And my mom had informed me that it was actually a remake. So I was like, well then go get the original. So she carted us down to that Blockbuster that I so often talk about, and we rented it. But it's weird, like that version was actually a colorized version of the movie, so they took the frames and then they colored it, which is odd, but whatever. And before that, that was maybe 4th, 5th, 3rd grade, I don't know, a long time ago. And then the second time I've seen it is when I did it for this podcast. King Kong is actually the inspiration for Godzilla, which I didn't know. Which is neat, because we're going to talk about Godzilla next episode. It's hard for me to be subjective with old movies like this. It's hard for me to place it in their time. Every once in a while, a movie will elevate itself above the time period, but I guess maybe that makes me a snob. But I don't watch a whole lot of older movies. That's not where my inspiration comes from. My inspiration comes from the movies I grew up with that were released around when I was alive. Every once in a while, like a movie like this, I'll check out. If it's important, like Citizen Kane, I'll watch. But I don't own it, and I don't feel the need to own it, and I don't cite it as a source of mine. So, like I said, it's hard for me to be subjective. However, those effects in this movie are amazing. I imagine seeing this on the big screen back then was probably akin to people seeing Superman in the 70s, or even me seeing Jurassic Park in the 90s, like being blown away by what's on the screen. If I could travel back in time and experience movies for what people experienced them at the time frame, King Kong would be my first stop. I would love to sit in that theater and experience it the way those people do and have those same feelings people did of seeing this gigantic ape on the big screen. And the types of effects that they used in this are not much different than what they did in 76, 40 years later. And what I mean by that is, obviously they don't have stop motion in the 76 version, it's a man in a suit. But the way they have the mechanical arm grab people, or the way they cut King Kong into the frame with people, like it's the same techniques is the word I'm looking for. The actions of the puppeteers is something to behold. When Kong is fighting the T-Rex, it's something that I could actually see a giant gorilla doing, if you will. From its headlocks to the playing with the jaw after it's dead. Like, how do you think of that stuff, you know? And I love when he grabs the girl, he untwirls the little restraints that are holding her to that thing. It's just the subtle nuances like that make this movie a masterpiece. The log twirl scene, like, it's live action people, and then it's probably, projected onto a screen behind them back then. Is probably how they would have to do it. But Kong is in the same frame as them. That scene was lifted for 76. And it's violent. Bodies are dropping from that log and hitting the bottom of the ravine. It's violent. I can't believe. Like, I guess I don't remember that, obviously. I've only seen it twice, but I couldn't believe to the extent this movie was showing these people being attacked by Kong. And when he stabs that lizard and drops it, like, that's my favorite scene right there. They must not have known much about dinosaurs at the time. Like the Brontosaurus, which they probably called it that back then, but that's not a real dinosaur anymore, I guess. It's eating the sailors, and the way the T-Rex stands. Obviously, their knowledge of dinosaurs was pretty primitive. I like the use of the dinosaurs in this, even though it kind of feels out of place. Obviously, this is a primordial island, but they feel odd. Like, there were no giant monkeys back when dinosaurs were around, so I'm just nitpicking at this point, because I actually loved this movie. It's weird. And the snake monster fight, again, was lifted for 76, and there really isn't much fighting in the 76 version, so I wonder if they initially had plans for more monsters, and then they ran out of money, maybe, or time? I don't know. Because in this version and then 2005, like, there's other creatures that he fights, obviously, and other creatures appearing. So I don't know the story behind that. And he also likes to play with his kills, which is kind of creepy, but also awesome to watch on the screen. I do like how he's a little bit more violent in the village in this one. Like, he's so pissed that he's had his lady stolen that when he comes hard charging into the village, like, he's like, he ain't taking no prisoners. As far as he's concerned, like, every one of you took his lady. He literally snatches up 2 villagers, throws them into the ground, and then steps on them. And they don't shy away from the amount of effects and screen time Kong has. Like, it is non-stop action, and it's pretty gripping for how old that movie is. But, and here's my argument with almost every King Kong movie. Did they really think that the villagers wouldn't see them sneaking into their village? Not that they would be expecting guests, but the villagers had pretty poor security, in my opinion. For some people trying to keep out a giant gorilla, maybe have some guards. I don't know. And it's interesting, like, Anne seems pretty calm when she's on that platform until she realizes the gravity of what's about to happen when she sees this giant monkey. And then her date mercilessly kills a stegosaurus later. I don't know. She's kind of up against a rock and a hard place. You know what I mean? Date the giant gorilla or date a guy who murders innocent stegosauruses. I don't know. And when they finally do get to New York, and this is probably done on purpose, but it blows me away that these people are about to see a giant fucking gorilla and they're uptight assholes. And then, like, once he finally does break out, some people are overreacting to a giant monkey getting out, and some people are underreacting. It's kind of hard to picture that, but, like, some are running for their lives, some are just, like, it looks like they're getting out of their seats to get popcorn. It's odd there. Maybe that was done on purpose, though. I'd love to talk King Kong with someone, so I always bring this up, but, message me later. Let's talk about this. And then the dude brings her to the one fucking building that the monkey is climbing. Like, I would stay away from that. Hello? But her scream, though. I don't know when was the last time you watched this, but her scream is very taxing. I was trying to watch this when my girlfriend was sleeping, and having her scream every 2 seconds at the top of her lungs was annoying. I don't care what version of King Kong you're watching. When he gets shot down and he falls off that building, that is heartbreaking. This one and Peter Jackson's version end in the same line, which I don't understand, and grammatically it seems silly to me. So if you can explain it to me, please do. But I do not get that line, beauty killed the beast. I don't get it. Maybe my brain isn't putting two and two together. I just think it's a silly line. So if you can explain it, please do. So the remake, 43 years later in 1976, is a seminal movie from our youth. This seems to be a theme popping up, but I swear to you, this doesn't happen all the time. We never owned it. Until, again, that DVD boom of the 2000s, like, we didn't own it. We watched it all the time. I could recite it to you word for word, but we never owned it. Rented it all the time, though. And I do remember we had this little rubber toy. Probably got it at Toys R Us. Its arms would move and nothing else. And I remember sticking its face and chest into an exercise bike wheel and gave it these neat little scars on it. We played with that all the time. And again, just like Total Recall, this movie gave me nightmares too. Most notably, when he comes thrashing through the gate and he reaches his hand over the top of the wall just as Charles Grodin is jumping down. Like, that's scary as shit. And then when she's snatched out of the bar, whew, or any scene in New York, really, like that, when they're in New York, I don't know if it was done on purpose, but that is some harrowing shit right there. This is a smart update to that movie, by the way. No one would travel on a ship now to go make a movie when you're out of money. You know what I mean? No captain in his right mind would sail without cash in hand. So this was a smart update. And I do believe there was an oil shortage at the time, so I wasn't alive then, but I do know around that sometime people run out of gas and things like that, so maybe that was play into it. I love the magical angle of this particular island. I want to see a movie of all the backstories that Jeff Bridges tells of the other explorers finding the island. I think there was 2 or 3 stories. Make it like a little anthology or even a comic book or something like that. I would love to see those stories. But them finding her adrift was a little too convenient. I would rather seen her character as part of the crew already, or maybe even Jeff Bridges' character. You know what I mean? And the circumstances of the yacht she was on blowing up were pretty dirty. She was saying that she didn't want to watch a movie that he was showing, the guy who owned the yacht, and which was Deep Throat. And then it blows up for some weird reason. Now, her being an actress is a nod to the original. At least her scream wasn't annoying, even if her name was. But it doesn't make her any less dumb than the other ones. She's willing to risk her safety to go sit on a beach of a potentially hazardous island. And they let her. They're just as dumb for letting her go. I would be like, you need to sit your ass on the boat until we're done exploring this island, making sure it's safe for everybody. And for finding her adrift, she sure does have a lot of women's clothes with her. And like I said, it's always been weird to me that people could easily breach the walls of that village, but Kong can't. I like the setup of the village in the 2005 remake, but having him right on the other side of that wall is what makes it so scary for me. That thin wall to him is the only thing protecting them, as opposed to what happens, or what the village is in the 2005 version. And I love his first appearance in here. Those tight close-ups on him, and that first-person view, so you don't quite see him yet, adds to that tension. And before the white people get there, I want to know what a Kong marriage looked like. Like, how does it, is this normal? Does he normally play with them? Or does he eat them? Or do they starve to death? And how often does he get a lady? I'd like to know that backstory. I'd also like to know what his breath smells like, because he blows on her to dry her off. It's gotta be rank. And you'll notice the aesthetic whenever Kong attacks anybody, or he's on the attack, is a stark contrast to when he's just with Dwan. When he attacks, it's always dark and gray and threatening. Even when he goes to New York, that's all it is, because he's on the attack. But when he's on the island, you'll notice, like when he's on the log, it's all rocks and jagged and threatening. But when he's with the girl, it's green and disarming and The music is different. That was a nice touch, I thought. And again, like I said just a minute ago, there's only one monster fight, so I wonder if they ran out of money, or they couldn't get the effect to work or look right or something like that. If anything else, what this movie does right is the setup to take Kong is a little more believable. You go to this island, and he even says he bet his whole career on finding oil on this island. What do you do when you don't find oil? Might as well, if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Might as well take this giant gorilla. We need to recoup our losses. This is how we're going to do it. However, what is unclear to me is how they were going to lure Kong back to the village without the girl. It was very coincidental that Jeff Bridges was coming back to the village right when they were setting that up. So I wonder if they were going to wait, maybe sacrifice another lady? I don't know, maybe attract her with noise? I'm not sure. Right on the coattails of that, they actually show Kong on the voyage back, which is great. And they have a space for him. Where are we gonna put him? In this space where we're gonna keep our oil. In the 33 version and the 05, like, they have this little boat. Where are you gonna put the monkey? This one is twice the size as the other ones, so maybe you could have fit a monkey in that boat, but there's no, like, open cavern like there is in this boat. How they got him out to that boat, though, is a mystery, so, I don't know. After she falls in there, none of the characters are the same after that. Jeff Bridges kind of strays away from those people on the boat that he made friends with. She's more depressed. The monkey's more depressed. And Kong kind of seems to accept his fate. Like, you know what? This is it. Like he's just sick of this shit. And he's like, I'm done. Why does he climb, though? Does anyone know why he climbs? In the 05, like, he's climbing because they're shooting at him. But in this one, he kind of just does it. I think in the 33 one as well. So if you have an answer to that, reach out to me. And I guess the only reason he climbed the Twin Towers in this one was because they were bigger than the Empire State Building. And he had a place to stand, I guess. I don't know. But at the end of this one, there is no stupid line, which is its saving grace. Not that it needed one, because I do love this movie. And it, of course, spawned a sequel 10 years later, King Kong Lives. Y'all remember that one? This is a weird sequel. Makes no sense. I think until I bought it, at the same time I bought King Kong from 76, we had only ever watched it at my grandparents'. It's weird. We'd rent it at their Blockbuster over there in Nevada. Again, we were very familiar with it, but never owned it. And I never realized until I was an adult when I bought it, how sexual this really was. Like, you could recut it as a romantic comedy with apes, and I recommend, if you want to check this movie out, not to watch it with anybody, because it's weird watching two giant gorillas try to romance one another. I watched it again for this podcast, obviously. And the more I think about it, the less and less I like it, and the less I want to watch it again. I don't agree with the Razzies. I think they should go away. But I 100% agree with the Razzies creator's thoughts on this movie. He says that it's like one of the 100 best bad movies, which it is. And there's a podcast out there called How Did This Get Made with Paul Scheer. I would hope that one day soon that they would do this movie. I would love to hear their take on it. It's written by two different people, which is funny. I mentioned in Total Recall that we were going to do another movie with the same writer of that, which is this one, Ronald Shusett, who also wrote Alien. I don't know the name of the other guy who wrote this, but they wrote it separately. So I wonder who had the better story, if they did at all. I'd like to see the other version of it, though. Maybe it's better. I doubt it, though. So I had some major complaints with this one, mostly because it infringes on what I love of the original, and not in a good way. Like, his roar is different. He had a very distinct roar in the 76 version. In this, it sounds like a grown man trying to imitate a gorilla. He's got a different design as well. It's very minute, but he's more ape-like and less bipedal. And it's almost a worse costume. The mouth doesn't look real anymore. And like I said, he looks like a giant ape as opposed to a bipedal monster, which is really what made him scary. in this its predecessor. Like, him being able to walk like a human is what made him a monster, as opposed to a giant gorilla. His hands are dumb too. Like, you can obviously tell that the person wearing the costume is wearing arm extensions. They should have given him a nasty scar, because what they do, if you're not familiar with this premise of this movie, after he falls off the Twin Towers, right? The University of Atlanta, Georgia, picks up his body and keeps his ass on ice for 10 years. This movie was made 10 years later. It takes place 10 years later. And they're keeping him alive for some reason. And they want to give him a new heart. And in order to do that, they've made a giant, what looks like a Jarvik artificial heart. But he won't survive the surgery without blood. But thank God, some guy over in Borneo finds another Kong, Lady Kong this time, so they can give him the transplant, and they do. But what they should have done afterwards is give him that, like a nasty scar where they cut him open or whatever, because they use giant surgical instruments. They're like comically large. Like, not even like we've modified it to open this giant gorilla. Like, we've just taken the same instruments we would for a normal human and blew them up. And what also would have been cool if once he's alive again, is if he still retained all his injuries from the first one. Like, maybe he's got a limp where he fell off the building, or he shattered his shoulder when he hit the ground, however many feet down the Twin Towers are, which probably would have liquefied him, to be honest with you. Or like a robot Kong. That would have been neat too, kind of like in King Kong Escapes, the Japanese version. There's like a robotic Mecha Kong, maybe some robotic parts. Now, the Lady Kong, I have no problem with, because there's nothing to compare to. That's the first time you see it. So her design and sound is fine. His just bothered me, and I can't figure out why they made the changes. My only guess is the first one was made by Paramount, and this one was by Fox, so maybe Paramount had trademarks on that sound and look. I don't know. And like I said, they keep his ass on ice for 10 years. 10 of them. Why do they keep him alive? And how did he survive that fall? I really have to ask that. That's a long way down, even for a big giant monkey. They don't even explain why they kept him alive. I can kind of get it, because they thought he was the only one, so you maybe want to study him or whatever, but it's never truly explained. People can spend their money on whatever they want to, but they go to great lengths to keep him alive. And finding another ape on another island so easily, it kills the magic of Skull Island. And like, it's not even like another remote magical island. It's Borneo. Like, people live there. So the white dude was on an expedition with some mules when he went to take a nap. Like, these people have never seen this giant gorilla before? Come on. But it does get straight to the ape action, so there is that. But you'd think that they'd learn to put better shackles on him. This is twice now that he's escaped. Let's see, because there was the first time in New York. So if you're going off the first movie, there's the first time in New York. Then there is, once they finish the operation, he wakes up and he's like jumping around, because they don't have him locked down, I don't believe. And then they sedate him. And then there's a third time that he breaks out and actually rips the shackles off of him. You'd think that they would like encase his body in something, so he couldn't get out. And when he escapes, if I was that lady's boss, I would have shut them down. I'd be like, you kept a big destructive ape alive, and now look what you've done? That's it. You're done. Goodbye. Out of here. Like, we have to kill him. Like we do. And the final showdown was lame. Like, you build up and build up. Kong has escaped, and then you shoot him out in a barn? That's dumb. It is a sad ending, though. Even though Kong cries and Lady Kong just gives this look like, pfft, typical. But maybe Kong is just destined to die. And this whole time, like, between when he's schmoozing her and when he gets shot up, like, they somehow copulated somewhere along the line. And now she's pregnant. and he's been missing for 9 months. Where a giant gorilla hides for 9 months is beyond me. But he's eating alligators and I don't know. But when she falls, because she's going into labor, and then she has the baby, and there's 2 different shots. There's one over her shoulder, and you can see that it looks like what a normal giant gorilla would look like. That sounds weird to say, but then it cuts to his point of view, and she reveals it, and it's like it's a man in a suit. Just like they are, but it's made to look little. So maybe it's a kid in a suit, I don't know, but it doesn't look like a baby gorilla. It doesn't look like she just squeezed that thing out. But it is sad. Like I said, Kong cries and it's sad. He's just destined to die. He really is. But if you thought this whole movie was weird, there's one part where they show some news footage. And there is a black child waving a Confederate flag. That is how weird this movie is. You have to watch it at least once. I recommend watching it alone or when you're drunk with someone, but that's about it. But you need to see it at least once. And finally, there's Peter Jackson's 2005 remake. I'm a fan of monster movies, so of course I'm excited for this. But when we saw it in the theater, I made fun of it the entire time. Maybe I wasn't in the right headspace or whatever, but it's one of those times where you're making fun of it. And I had this happen in Harry Potter too, where you're making fun of it and the people are annoyed because they're trying to watch the movie, but they're also laughing. So that was a weird take, but I've since come to respect it. It follows a similar story to the original, but tries to give the characters more background, and that the further character development definitely helps you understand their motivations and why they're doing things. There's a couple nods to the original. When they're in the car, Jack Black wants Fay Wray, but she's doing a picture with RKO, which is a nod to the original. Because Fay Wray was the actress, RKO was the studio, so that was neat. But it takes a really long time for things to get going. There's an hour to get there, so an hour before Kong. There's an hour on the island, and an hour back in New York. But we do have a version of this, and the 1998 Godzilla, to thank for Lord of the Rings. So, Peter Jackson was working on a version of King Kong back in the middle 90s. And then the 98 Godzilla version came out, and it was a giant disaster. I still like it, but we'll talk about that later. Which prompted Universal to put this on hold. So Jackson goes off and makes the Lord of the Rings. So you can't be too angry at the Godzilla version of 1998. Or, in retrospect, King Kong. It is trying to be something bigger than itself, and you have to give it props for that, because it doesn't fail 100%, even if it is very bloated. And the extended cut, which Jackson seems to have a trademark on, doesn't add much, except for 22 minutes. And Jack Black is an odd choice for Carl Denham in this. I typically love comedians in their serious roles, like Steve Carell in Crazy Stupid Love, or Adam Sandler in Punch Drunk Love, or another comedian in another title with the word love in it. But he's just an odd choice in this. He doesn't quite fit, and maybe that's because he has such a larger-than-life personality anyway, that I can't see past that. But there is a nice little Orange County reunion with Jack Black and Colin Hanks in it. But what's odd to me is the map to Skull Island. Is it a MacGuffin? He seems to already have it in his possession. I just think there's a better way to approach it. Like he's down on his luck, and then he buys the map from a crazy person on the street or something like that. In a movie this good, I can't help but roll my eyes at how he finds the map and is so eager to go. However, once they get there, it is a better dramatic reveal of the island. It's more menacing, like the rocks are sticking out everywhere, and then they have those creepy carvings of the stones in the water, and then the ship actually crashes and stuff like that. And there's a wall around the island as well. So it makes me wonder, are they trying to keep people out or the monsters in? And the villagers actually live on the edge of the island with a chasm separating them from the rest of the island. So the villagers obviously want to distance themselves, but are they guarding the monsters? Or are they protecting them or protecting us? I'm not sure. That's part of the allure, I guess, of that village, but the world may never know. The villagers are frightening as well. They look tired of what they go through. Like, they look tired of having to sacrifice their ladies to Kong or worship Kong or whatever. And this is probably how they'd really react if people showed up. You know what I mean? Like, they kill people. They were about to kill everyone there. And they're about to kill everyone in Jackson's terrible, choppy slow-mo, which I can't stand. And this is the first time we actually see previous brides, albeit they're skeletons. And there's ruins in the interior as well. So people have been there before. Why did they leave? Was it because Kong showed up? Or did they used to live in harmony and something went wrong? There's several ape skeletons, too, in his lair. There's one up against the wall that looks like it's sitting on a throne. They're laid out by where he lays and sleeps. So I want to see that movie when all that stuff is new. I want to see how that relationship deteriorated. And I don't mind him being more ape-like in this because there is no precedent. Like, King Kong Lives bothered me because there was a precedent with the one before that. And it deviated too much from that. But in this, it's fine. Because he is what he is. And I dig the injuries that he has. Like, he's got scars all over him. He's got that broken jaw. And this Kong is stated to be 20 to 25 feet tall. In 76, he was about 50 feet tall. And the director of the new one coming out next year says that, or it might be this year, depending on when this podcast is released, that his is the biggest Kong we've seen yet. So, how big is the new one? I'll talk about that in a second. You know, say what you will about this movie, but you cannot deny that the V-Rex fight is amazing. Jackson really knows how to craft an action scene. And it shows how much of a badass King Kong is, because he fights 3 fucking dinosaurs pretty much one-handed. He really earns his crown for that fight alone. And I love when he's battling the T-Rex and he opens his jaw and, like, bites his tongue off. That's amazing. And I guess that last battle, once they're back on the ground and there's only one T-Rex left, that is shot for shot, almost like the original. Down to the playing with the jaw. So I'll have to check that out again, but that's interesting to know. And once they finally capture him, you know, they're wading through that cave and they're trying to escape, and Jack Black throws that chloroform in his face. Like, that is a genuinely sad scene. Like, I think I remember maybe shedding a tear at one time. And what this one manages to do is make the relationship between Kong and Ann not as weird. It's not sexual in nature, if you will. It's more like a companionship. He's not there to get his rocks off. He's there because he's lonely. You know what I mean? And I like how every action that he takes in New York is the result of something logical. Like, he's running away because they're shooting at him. He climbs the Empire State Building because they're shooting at him. It's not because he's like, oh shit, there's a tall tower, let's go climb it. No, it's because he wants to get away from being shot at. She's still an idiot, though. Once he puts her in the building, she's running around trying to chase him as they're shooting up the building. Like, what is wrong with this lady? I would have let her fall if she's going to act like that. And of course, this one still has that stupid line. Again, if you know what it means, please let me know, because I would love to figure that one out. I just can't. It's terrible. As of right now, Kong Skull Island has not been released yet. I think it's March of 2017. So, like I said, I love King Kong, so I'm super excited about this. Everything I've seen from the trailer so far has been amazing. I'm just super stoked with what I've seen so far. I kind of dropped the hint earlier that Kong is destined to die no matter where he's at. So with the announcement of a shared universe with him and Godzilla, I'm curious how the new one's going to end. Like, will they take him off the island? And if so, will there be more than one Kong? And again, the director has said it's the biggest Kong we've seen. I wonder, it hasn't looked too weird yet, but I wonder if he's too big. Godzilla is almost like 300 feet tall, I think. And in King Kong vs. Godzilla, the Japanese version, they're the same height. So 50 feet to 300 is a big jump. I'm curious how they're going to play that movie. I'm a little leery, but I'll hold out judgment until I see it. That was interesting, wasn't it? This episode was originally supposed to be number 5 in the release order, but through various special episodes and holiday delays, it just didn't happen. And then once it came time to come around to this episode, I just realized that it was extremely close to Kong Skull Island's release date anyway. So I reached out on Twitter and was like, should I wait? And people were like, yeah. See the movie, record it, and then release it. So here I am. So it's interesting to kind of listen to that, my thoughts before the movie, and then now having seen it, know what's happening. So my initial thoughts on the movie are, it's good. The sound in the theater I saw it in was not great, so maybe I'll venture out again, and I'd like to see it in IMAX, but I'm not a big fan of 3D, so that kind of hampers it a little bit. But my first topic, and going back to what I'd mentioned before on the trailer, his size, it doesn't really, it wasn't bothersome to me in the movie. I was concerned about it, but it doesn't stand out in the movie as him being too big. Now, as far as him fighting Godzilla, are they going to somehow make him taller? Because I still think that the Godzilla from the new ones is like 300-something feet tall, so how are they going to make him fight? How are they going to bring him together? Would be a good question. And to my other point, Kong is in fact a bipedal monster in this one, which is a nice change of pace. You might have seen some hot takes or reviews of this movie where they're saying that it's big dumb fun, or some other iteration of that. It is. It's big dumb fun. It's not a movie like 2005's King Kong where it's more character driven. This is more actiony. It relates more to the 76 version than it does any other version before that. And that is something I'm perfectly okay with. It really wastes no time getting to the monster action. You really see Kong in the opening act of it, the prologue, if you will. It's not a full-on here's Kong, but he does show up right there. The dialogue is a little hokey at the very beginning. It's almost like if it's written like you are explaining the movie to someone. They're very direct with their requests and how they talk to one another. There's even a point where John Goodman and his pal get out of a taxi cab in Washington to go kind of secure funding for this trip to Skull Island. And one of their briefcases has a giant Monarch logo on it. And if you don't know what Monarch is, it's that nefarious clandestine organization from Godzilla that Ken Watanabe was part of. And it's very obvious, and I've never known anyone, maybe unless you work for the Umbrella Corporation, where they slap their logo on everything. So things like that are a little jarring, but overall, the movie's great. It looks great. It's shot wonderfully. The monster fights are great. I did find myself wanting more King Kong though. I almost feel, even with Godzilla's drawbacks in the new one, I almost feel like I saw more of him in that than I did King Kong. One of my favorite aspects of this movie is it's its own thing. It doesn't rehash them going to the island and the girl getting taken and him falling in love with her, which is the weirdest thing of a giant monkey falling in love with a lady. So I like that it made it its own thing. It doesn't even really... It's not heavy-handed in the way it's trying to fit in with the Godzilla universe. It makes sense. It obviously takes place in the 70s, so it's retroactive to Godzilla 2014. So it can kind of... Now it can sort of write the rules of this universe. Monarch and Godzilla it's peppered throughout. You kind of know who they are a little bit, but in this one, it's more of a setup to what this company's looking for and what their goals are as far as dealing with these monsters. So if you haven't seen this movie, I recommend you go out and do that. And when you do, make sure you stay to the end of the end credits, because there is a little scene that sets up more Godzilla and their shared universe and things like that. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So until next time, that is a wrap.
Mr. Brown, that's a little too close to Mr. Shit. Are you the police?
No, man. We're musicians. I work for Kaiser Soze. I work for Kaiser Soze.
Where's the fucking money, shithead?